So you would have sketched out your Tiki Head in your sketchbook. Hopefully you have a plan laid out, looked at some other examples so that you are ready to construct and build and have an idea of what direction you're going in when it comes to making this. So we're going to work, just kind of get started on this one. I'm going to show you how to get started, and then you'll be able to take it from there. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to roll out your slab, which I did this one previously so that it was ready to go, and then I smoothed it out so that I would have a nice clean surface. The next thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need one of these tubes. Okay? You're going to need to take a piece of newsprint and wrap it around the tube. When we do this, we want to be able to secure it so that it doesn't slide off. So I'm going to take just a couple of pieces of tape that I'm going to tear off first. And then when I wrap my newsprint around the tube, I want to make sure it's even with the bottom of the tube. I don't want it hanging over down on this end. So I'm going to make sure it's even, or as close to even as I can get it. And then I'm going to tape the newsprint to the newsprint. I don't want to tape it to the tube because I want to be able to take the tube out and leave the newsprint inside Tiki Head. So once I've got the newsprint set out, I've got my slab out, I need to start rolling. I need to roll my slab onto my tube. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make a nice clean edge on the bottom. So when I cut a straight line without a template, I want to always cut from my shoulder. So using my knife from my tool bin, I'm going to start at one end, kind of stand off to the side because I'm right-handed, and I'm just going to pull it straight down, again just moving my shoulder with my arm back, and that's going to give me as straight of a line as I can just get freehand. Okay? This excess clay I can take off because I'm not going to need that right now, and then I'm ready to roll this onto my tube. So I'm going to set my tube in a little bit, and I want to pick up my clay on one end, roll my tube back, and then kind of roll the clay slowly onto my tube. When you first roll out your slab, it's going to be pretty wet, and it's going to have a lot of movement to it. I made this slab extra long because when I roll this on, I'll be able to mark where it rolls over onto itself. And then I can cut that. And I'm going to need this excess clay for the bottom of it. So I'm going to roll this on, and I'm going to pick this up. When I pick it up, you can see that there's a gap here. So I'm just going to take the clay, and I'm just going to press it together with my hands. And I want to keep this as tight on the tube as possible. I'm just going to press this together. I don't need to score and slip it because my clay is pretty wet. And I just want to press it on and blend it in so that it looks like it's one piece of clay. If I want to, I can use my wooden rib and I can run that up the side. And that'll help blend it together and kind of get rid of those ridges that my fingers make. Now I've got some excess clay in this spot where my clay overlaps, and I want to keep that because that's where I'm going to build my face when I'm ready to do that. Then I'm ready to put it on to put a base. So I need to create a base so that I've got a bottom to it. You'll notice on these examples that it's hollow on the inside, and then we have a nice base on the bottom for it to sit on. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to set it on here, and I don't want to press it down because if I press down too much, that plastic tube that will cut through the bottom, and I don't want to cut through the bottom of my base. So I'm just going to cut around it. I'm going to leave a small amount of clay extra around the base. I'll show you why in a minute. So once I cut that around, I'm going to cut off my excess. And I'll be able to use this for other stuff later in the process. Then I'm going to take what's around the edge here, and I'm just going to bring it up and into my clay that's already there. Okay, and then the same thing we did with the seam. I'm going to make sure I bring this up and I blend it in to my sides. Once we take the support of the tube out, we're going to want to put this on something that allows us to work around it on different sides without having to pick it up and move it too much. So once I've got that blended in, now I need to cut my height. So I'm going to cut it to where the top of the tube is. So I'm going to cut down first, and then I'm going to turn, and I'm just going to use the top of the tube as my guide as I cut around the outside. And it'll cut and tear the paper that's in there, but that's okay because we're eventually going to take that out anyway. So then I can take this excess off and set it off to the side. Now I want to grab a banding wheel from my table. And I always want to put one of the black bats on top of it, otherwise my piece will stick to my banding wheel. So I have my bat on top that I'm actually going to build my tiki head on. I've got this excess paper, which is fine. Now to take my tube out, I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to put it in the middle of the tube and just put some pressure on the outside, and I'm going to twist it, and it should slide right out. And then I'm done with that, and somebody else can use it to do the base of theirs. Then I'm going to take my paper out, and if I grab it and just kind of twist, again, that should pull out easily because it would be a little wet, but it wouldn't be stuck to it. So now if you look down on the inside, you have a seam that runs down where we joined our two slabs, and you'll see a seam at the bottom where the base meets the sides. We want to make sure that seam at the bottom is sealed up so it looks like it's one piece of clay. So I'm going to take some of the excess that I just cut off, and I'm going to form it into just a coil with my hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this coil and I'm going to put it around the bottom on the inside. And because my hands are kind of big, I'm not going to be able to see in there while I'm placing this, so I just kind of have to do it by touch. And make sure I get it all the way in and all the way around. Okay. Once I have it placed in there, and I've got a little bit of excess which I'll take out eventually, I can start pressing that coil into the bottom and into the sides. When I do this, I want to make sure I have one hand on the outside that is kind of catching it so that I don't push the base of my tiki head out too much. I can pull that excess off. Again, make sure I'm supporting the outside so I'm not widening out the base too much. And then blend my coil in to the bottom and up into the sides as if it's one piece of clay. So that when I look down on the inside of my tiki head, I don't see any seams in any corners, and if I wanted to, it could hold water. Okay, make sure it's pressed into the bottom really well. And again, this banding wheel helps because I'm able to just turn it without, manipulating my body too much. If you are struggling to get your hand in, you can always use your wooden modeling tool, the end of which is similar to the shape of your finger. And I can use the end of that, and I can see inside as I blend that clay up into the sides. Now that I have that done, I'm ready to start actually sculpting the face of my tiki head. When I start to do that, the first day you're doing this, your clay is soft enough that you'll be able to just press clay onto the surface. You also have extra clay along that seam that we talked about, so that's where I'm going to put my nose. So on my design, my nose sticks out quite a bit, so I'm going to start building that on my design about here. So I can start to manipulate and press the clay a little bit to kind of stretch it, because I've got a lot of extra in that spot. I don't want to do this too much though, because if I try and stretch the clay too much, the clay will start to tear. And once you have tears in your clay, they're really kind of hard to fix later on. So once I kind of have that basic shape laid out, and then I'm going to have these rounded cheeks kind of coming out. Okay, I've kind of laid out where stuff is going to be. Now I can start adding clay to the surface. So I'm just going to take some of my small amounts of clay. I'm going to start blending them in. I only want to do small amounts, because if I do large amounts I'll have to score and slip those on. Small amounts you can build up the surface and make sure you just blend them in really well. Then when I go to add larger pieces, like if I want to add the lips where the mouth is, then I would add those on by scoring and slipping. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my clay out into a pretty even coil. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect because the size of it on my drawing isn't perfect. And because these, we want to kind of give that carved wood look to it, we don't necessarily need to have it even all the way around. So with this I'm going to mark with my needle tool where I want that mouth to go. So I'm just going to kind of draw on here. Making sure it's fairly even. And then I'm actually going to score and slip this piece on. So I'm going to score the bottom of my tiki head, the base of it. Because I'm also not really going to blend this in a whole lot. Then I'm going to score my coil. I'm going to put slip on the main body of it. Again, covering up my score marks so that they're filled in with a little extra slip on there. And then I'm going to place my coil onto the front of it. My coil is a lot longer than I need, so I'm just going to make sure it gets to where I have it filled in. And then I can blend that so that looks like it's one piece all the way around. And I can make any adjustments I need to with the shape just by kind of stretching it and pinching it a little bit on the surface. If I want it to come up a little bit more on the corners, or if I want it to come down a little bit more, I can stretch this quite a bit and then clean it up. Clean up my excess slip. All the way around. And then I'm going to let this set a little bit before I really do anything with it. Because when I add slip, I add a lot of moisture to this, so it's going to be really wet. So any manipulation I do of the clay at this point, there's a chance that I could dent it and deform it more than I want to. So I'm just going to kind of get things to a roughed in spot, and then I'd let the mouth part sit, overnight probably, to the next day before I do more with that. Because I'll go in and I'll add teeth and things like that. So I've kind of got the mouth laid out. I know where my nose are, my two cheeks. I would do the eyes in a similar fashion. I'd probably take a coil and I'd score and slip it on and then blend it so that I get that eye shape. And then this top part, this crown part, I will take some of the excess clay that I have from when I rolled out my slab. And I'd start with this, and I'd score and slip that on before I really did anything else decorative with it. So score and slip it. And for this, I'm going to put my slip on the piece I'm attaching rather than putting it on the Tiki Head because it's just a little bit easier. Make sure the high point of it is lined up with the middle of my nose on here. And then I'm going to attach it. And I'm just going to press it on in a pinch pot style. And on the back side, this side comes out further, so I'm just going to line them up. I'm just going to cut off that excess. So that it's even on both sides. And again, just pinch it on. And then I can add that bigger piece onto it later. And add my detail onto it. Kind of rough it up a little bit. And that's all the process you would need for constructing your Tiki Head.